Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle and triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in. Thank you for joining us today for this episode of Her Version. The Her Version platform is built on storytelling and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. Today, I'm speaking with an amazing woman named Lara Wellman. Lara is a business owner, a mother, and a wife who functions with ADHD. She is now a coach that helps women do more in less time so that they can spend more time with their family and still make lots of money. Excited for the awesomeness that Lara will be sharing today. Welcome, lady. How are you?
I am good, and thank you for having me today.
Yes, thank you for being here. I so appreciate you taking some time out of your day to sit down and relax with me and share some of your nuggets of information. I so appreciate individuals like yourself who understand how important it is to share, to share some of your story, some of your background, some of your journey that you've been on that led you to where you are. Because a lot of times that stuff is kind of erased and people just kind of see you as you are and they're like, oh, Lara's awesome, she's never had any problems in her whole entire life. So it's important to kind of sit back and say like, hey, listen, actually, no, um, there was some
Yeah.
stuff for sure. So first of all, where are you from?
So I am from Ottawa, Ontario, in Canada. So the capital city of Canada.
Awesome. How long you been there for?
I have been here for, and this is where you're like, almost 30 years. So,
Really?
yeah, it was just after high school that we moved. I moved with my parents because my mother got a government job. And so then I moved with them and then continued my education here, and I've been here ever since.
Fantastic. I love
Yeah,
it. Probably getting a little chilly right now.
it is.
Yeah,
Yes, it is. But I can't tell you in Fahrenheit what temperature it is. So, it's just
totally.
colder.
I totally get it. And I'm all the way on the opposite side. It's like 80 degrees this weekend here in Florida. We went to the
Mhm.
beach. It was nice.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I'd love to just kind of jump in and learn a little bit more about you and hear some of the stories and the journeys and the nuggets of information that you have. So, I'd like to kind of just start out with just a generic question of what's the story that changed your life and what did you learn from it? What's like the one story that like you pivoted and it changed everything?
Yeah, and I was trying to think about like what is the one story for me. The beauty of story is that it's not even always the big stories. It's like the culmination of the little stories, right? People saying, I did this, I was able to do that. And my big one was I went to a camp for entrepreneurs. It was a sleepaway camp for entrepreneurs in the like up in the Catskills of New York. And there were like 350 people, sleeping in the cabins, and there were talks and there were workshops, and almost all of them just were being themselves, right? They were walking around telling their stories of how they didn't need to be the thing that everybody seemed to think you needed to be to have a successful business. You didn't need to be this. They could be, they could love yoga. They could just do things, break down all the rules. They could be themselves. And so all of these people simply, it was like the repetition of the little stories over that weekend. And I walked away and I thought, why am I trying to be somebody I'm not? Why am I trying to do everything the way the rule book told me to do it? What if I just do some of the things that I've been wanting to do, but keep telling myself, that's not really how you do that though, is it? What if I just do that? And I came home and I started doing it, and it changed the face of my business. It changed how I felt about myself, and like since that time, who I am as a human is exceptionally different. And I think, like I said, it wasn't one story that I heard. It was people seeing or showing me, modeling to me, telling me their story in these just authentically small ways that changed how I felt about what I could be.
Yeah. Do you have any example of the rules that you had for yourself, like set out that were just like a
Yeah.
good
Well, I mean, the simplest one for me was, so I used to do social media marketing consulting. I was teaching people how to market themselves. And one of the rules in marketing is you really want to have a niche and you want to be clear, and people need to know what it is you do, and you don't want to confuse them by doing a million different things. I have ADHD. I like to do a million different things, right? I was like, oh. And so every time I had an inspired new idea, I was like, no, you got to stay on track. You're going to confuse your audience. Nobody's going to understand what you do if you're confusing them. And I came home and I was like, no, I really want to just create a community for business owners and support them in all things business. Marketing can be in there, but I'm going to support them in all things business. So this was, I don't know, maybe 7 years ago now. And I created a Facebook group. And back then, Facebook groups were different than they are now. And they were like not the thing yet. And when people were in there, I had this just massively engaged Facebook group. And suddenly I was connecting with people in a way I had never connected with them when I was just teaching them things. And we started getting together in person. We started having events. I was like, maybe I want to try running a mastermind. It was all just sort of built on this decision that even though it wasn't really what I was supposed to be doing, because I had to be clear and it was about marketing, and it wasn't about, I was like, if it's supposed to be about marketing, this isn't about marketing. Oh, it's like, I'm going to do it anyway. And the name of my business, which is the Biz Studio, is actually the name of that Facebook group. So that Facebook group came first. And that name, which I spent time sort of figuring out for this community, because it was designed to be a place. I wanted it to be something that had a name that made it feel like a place that people did something together and created things. That's where that came from. And it just kept growing and growing. So to me, that decision to just let myself do the thing that was different is what changed the entire face of my business and my life, because a lot of things kept growing from there.
That's fantastic. When you talk about niches, what did you do with that? Did you decide against that? And then can you tell us like what are
Um, well, so sort of, right? Like what I did was I decided that there were two prongs to my business, and one of them was supporting small business owners. And that, so my niche was just still supporting small business owners. And in some ways it was with marketing, and in some ways it was with overall. But I also stopped getting too stuck in the person that I help is this gender, makes this much money, lives in this kind of house. And it's more, I want to help people who have certain values. I want to just know that I can connect with people based on how they like to communicate. And that is the change, right? People started to feel like I was a safe place, and they wanted a safe place. And that alone, the people who wanted that are different than the other people who I didn't really want to work with. It became its own niche, and understanding how to talk to people who were looking for that was specific marketing, right? That is still a thing, but getting stuck in, I can only talk about one topic, otherwise nobody's going to pay attention. I think maybe that's true in some ways. And you don't want to be all over the place all of the time, but you can change that rule. You can branch out into other things, and you can let people see other sides of you without it taking away the fact that they still know what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Um, ADHD. When did you find that out?
So one of my kids was diagnosed when he was in grade 1, and it was during the sort of reporting part with the psychologist. She's telling us a little bit about him. And for whatever reason, and this is the part I'm like, I can't remember how this came up, but she said the number one thing she heard from undiagnosed adults with ADHD was that they considered themselves to be lazy people, right? If they were going to tell you a little bit about them, they're going to be like, I'm really lazy. And I was like, oh, could you tell me a little bit more about that? It's like, I would tell people all the time how I was lazy. I really believed I was lazy. And so I would say, I'm really lazy. And then somebody would be like, Lara, you have more than one business, right? So I had my business, but I also had started a blog. I've had this blog that's for parents in my city for the last 12 years. I started a conference. I would start, like, I was constantly starting and running things. And people were like, what are you talking about? You're lazy. I was like, yeah, but like sometimes I'm really bad at things. And sometimes I like to do nothing, right? I like to watch a lot of Netflix. And right, like if you think about what you hear out in the world, a successful entrepreneur loves their work all of the time. They're getting up at 4 a.m. because they're going to hustle harder and make it work, right? So for me to think, well, I can't do that. I don't want to do that. Clearly, I'm lazy because there's all kinds of times when I don't want to do anything. And people who aren't lazy don't do that. And that was me. I was like, sometimes I just need downtime. But I couldn't see, like, as soon as I looked at the parts that I thought were lazy, it undid all of the successful part. I was like, I'm just a lazy person. I couldn't even see the things that I did well because clearly somebody who doesn't want to work all the time or who does this or who, likes to read trashy novels, like that's not the picture of a successful person. Fortunately, I've let go of a lot of that, but that was really what I thought. And when she said that, I was like, oh, like you're talking to me. And then honestly, the biggest thing that came from my ADHD diagnosis was recognizing how much shame I held in so many parts of my life, in my feelings of not being good at things, right? Even, from managing all my kids, like if you have kids and you have to fill out forms for school and all that, right? Like I'm the parent who like forgot to send in the thing, or so and so showed up at school without their lunch, or my house isn't tidy some of the time. I'd be like, the reason that my desk has video facing this lovely wall is because I can't make a mess on the wall. And so accepting all of these things about myself was so key in removing the shame I was carrying around all the time at not being good enough, right? It's like I felt like I'd never figured out how to be an adult the way people said you were supposed to be, right? By the time you're this, you're not going to want to do this. You're going to want to keep everything tidy all the time. You're going to be really good at keeping the calendar organized. And I was like, I never figured it out. And so I felt terrible about myself because of it. And then the more I understood about different brains, about myself, I could let go of so much of that shame. And so that's where I'm at now. And I think you asked me a simple question and I went a really long way around that, but that's a bit of the ADHD story.
I love it. So did you say it was your son or your daughter who got diagnosed?
My son first, but all 3 of my kids have now been diagnosed.
How is the like the empathy or the communication or the aha moments now that you're kind of like seeing yourself almost in a childlike form? Like, is there any like, whoa, ever?
Absolutely. And I mean, the thing is, I have 3 kids with ADHD and they all do ADHD differently, right? Like there's no like commonality other than emotional dysregulation is pretty common, right? So that's where this part comes. When you get overwhelmed. With kids, they have a meltdown. With adults, they have meltdowns, and we don't call them. That's when you like lose your shit and scream at somebody, right? Like you're like, I am the problem. And that's some of the stuff that I've been able to figure out, right? Like I know I'm emotionally dysregulated. It's not just them. I have a role in these like that you can have with your kids. And so sometimes I can tell them, you need to back away because I'm not going to be able to keep it together. I can tell right now, like I can see it coming. I caution you right now. Like I can see it enough that I can stop it, but we get to a certain point and like,
Yeah.
just like you do.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, it's understanding that I also have that dysregulation. It's not just that they're having issues. Like there are times when all of us coming together, like the chaos comes from our emotions bumping up against each other. And being aware of that is huge. It's huge. It helps you walk away. It helps you not double down on things. It helps you find ways to back away when you see it coming. And it helps you be empathetic to yourself and to them when you understand that that's what's going on.
Yeah, I could see that. What would you
Mhm.
say are some of the awesome things about ADHD?
Oh, there's so many awesome things. There are the things like just it's like your brain is on fire, right? You have all the ideas. There's so much going on. And sometimes like the interests come in and the inspiration, and you're like, big ideas. And then you want to go all in and go for it. And that's really exciting. And new and innovative things come that way. The other thing is when you're like that, you get used to not everything you try working out. So it makes you a little bit more
Oh,
able to deal with failure, right? You're like, it doesn't always work out, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to do it because I really want to. Like when you're super into something, you go for it. And so that's one piece. Hyper focus, right? So ADHD, I think some people think of it as just as like the squirrel kind of thing. But what it is more than anything is an inability to have somebody else tell you what to focus on. Right? So if you tell me it's time to do something and I'm like, I don't really want to do it, it is very difficult for me to like go all in and do it. But if I suddenly got some hit of inspiration, like you can hyper focus and just like go, 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 go. And I can get things done so quickly once I get excited and inspired about it, right? So for all that time that I was watching Netflix, I could do that because when I did go in and do all those other things, the exciting things I was starting, I could do them quite quickly. But I can't sustain that. I can't go at full force all of the time. I'm
yeah,
just kind of spreading out the doing in a different amount of time than other people. So the hyper focus can be amazing, but the inspiration, the ability to just do different things, I think there's so many things that are cool about it. Being able to be aware of a lot of things. So one of the things I struggle with is I hear everything. I once had my hearing tested because I was like, I think I'm losing my hearing. I go to these events and I can't understand anybody. And he said, this was before my ADHD diagnosis. And I was like, when he said, your hearing is impeccable, but I think you're having a hard time processing the information. I was like, what are you talking about? It's the inability. So when you're in a big room with all the people talking and you hear all of it and you can't just bring it down to like one person. So if you and I are talking in a busy room, I can hear those people talking. I can hear those people talking. I can hear those people talking. And I have a really hard time filtering it out to just hear you.
wow.
But in another setting, if I'm just having a one-on-one conversation, I'm exceptionally perceptive and I pick up on body cues. I pick up on lots of things other people don't notice because I'm really perceptive. So if you the same thing can mean two different things depending on the setting.
Yeah.
And that's where you can be like, yeah, it's a problem here, but it's a gift here. And if you're only looking at the problems, that's when all the shame and the feeling crappy about yourself comes in. And you need to find the things you're good at to focus on, because then like you're really good at stuff too.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I love that. Very, very cool. How long have you been, well, when was your diagnosis?
About 6.5 years ago now. So
Very
it's been a
cool.
while. Yeah.
Do you embrace or seek out or um, kind of coach individuals into recognizing that they are ADHD? Like, have you ever said like, "Hey,
I think
we're not
that
doctors,
it's
but
almost like that story I said at the beginning. So I don't ever say, "Do you think
yeah,
you have ADHD?" I never do that.
yeah,
But what I find is
okay.
people are around me and they hear my stories and I talk about how I do things, and then they start to say, like, "I think we're a lot alike." Right? And
Ah,
they haven't gotten beyond that yet, right? "Oh, you talk about a lot of the things that I notice about myself." And like a little bit further and they're like, "I wonder if I have ADHD." Like, maybe.
yeah,
Uh, but it's being in a place where you feel safe enough to look at something without feeling like it's a criticism, right? So I
yeah,
don't walk around being like, "And then I did this, and then I did this, and this is terrible, and this is," right? I'm like, "This is how I do it. Sometimes I mess this up." I try to be pretty transparent too about that, right? Like, "Ugh," right? Like there are times I'm like, "Oh, that went in the calendar wrong." My assistant told me not to do this myself, and I did it anyway, even though I know that I'm gonna put it in the wrong place, or like I try to do something in the back end. I'm like, "No, no, it'll be no problem." And she's like, "Don't touch it. You don't know what you're doing, but you think you do." And that is the worst part of anybody trying to fix things, when they think they know what they're doing and they actually don't, or they think they can figure it out. And so I'll say that, right? I was like, "Oh, I shouldn't do that." And I know I shouldn't do that. I should let somebody else do that part. Um, and when I accept it about myself that way, instead of it being a problem,
Mhm.
people can see it and not fear it. Because some people get an ADHD diagnosis and they're like, like now I'm broken, right?
Yeah,
And, oh, and I like to talk about it as a gift, because when you have that diagnosis, I mean, it's true either way, whether or not you get diagnosed, I mean, it's true.
yeah,
If you're wanting to get diagnosed, the likelihood that you're struggling is pretty high. There's something that is a struggle. Otherwise, like if everything was going smoothly and you had all the strategies that worked in the world, you probably wouldn't be like, "You know what I need to go see if I have ADHD."
yeah. Okay.
Right? Like things
Yeah,
are working. I'm not going to go look for a diagnosis when nothing is feeling wrong.
yeah,
And so the only thing for me that I see for people with this diagnosis is information that can help them make things better.
totally.
And I think the world has been built for like one category of people.
Mhm.
Um, and I think a lot of people aren't like that category of people. And so ADHD is a disorder, right? But it's a disorder because I can't do things the way they're meant to be in this way that's been created based on other people's brains. So if instead I think, well, what if I'm gonna create my own lane over here. I'm gonna do things the way they work for me and stop thinking I have to always do them that way.
Yeah,
It's less of a problem. The more you try to do things like the rules way, the old way, the more of a problem it can be. And I have a lot of privilege that helps me be able to step away and not do it the way other people do it, right? Everything from having my own business, which I think, folks with ADHD, there's a huge percentage of business owners who have ADHD, because we're like, we don't want to work for other people. not going to work for me. um, and so, yeah, so I think it's about finding how the more you learn about how you think, the better. Like I know people who have been tested and they found out things about like how they process information they didn't know, and it explains so much. Somebody I know who the way they process information is it's really 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 exceptional if it's visual. So you give them something that they read,
Yeah.
bang on. You tell them, they're like, okay, and they walking away and they're like, I don't remember what they said. I don't remember what I'm supposed to do. And so then there's if you can feel like, "Ugh, like, why do I suck?" Or you can be like, it's really better if you just send this to me in an email. If you send it to me in an email, I can go back and double check it. I can make sure I understood everything correctly, and
Yeah.
it's really gonna stick for me that way. So that's the option of accepting who you are and going with what works versus feeling really bad about yourself because you can't do it when somebody talks to you and you're supposed to be able to.
Absolutely. And that's the difference between knowing and not knowing.
Exactly. Because until you learn that about yourself, you're just like, I don't know why I suck at this. Why am I terrible at I guess I just need to pay more attention. Why am I not paying attention? I should pay attention. And you're like, it's not just that you should pay attention. Like your brain doesn't process that information the same way.
Yeah.
I think brains are fascinating. I'm actually working on my book right now. So I've been wanting to do this for a few years. Focusing on it right now. And just today I was um, writing and thinking about aphantasia. So I don't know. Do you know what aphantasia is? Took
I
me
mean,
to 10.
Fantasia is the cartoon. No, then
Yeah.
no.
So it's nothing to do with that. So aphantasia is when somebody does not have the ability to visualize anything in their brain. So if I said to you, close your eyes and picture a beach, can you bring up an image of a beach? Some people, they'll bring up like it's almost like a movie, right? And it's got sound and it's got smell and it's moving. And some people will be like it's like a photograph. And so first I'm going to ask you, like, do you know if I said to you I want you to visualize a beach, what happens? What do you see?
It would be a movie for sure because I do this stuff all the time.
Yeah. And is there sound? Is there
Yeah.
smell?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't do that. I can't see anything. I cannot pull up an image in my mind. And that's called aphantasia. And it's
Like,
actually fairly
like,
common.
like, could you do it if like we were like, let's take a full 10 minutes and like actually break this down and
No, there's no images in my brain.
wow.
There's no sounds, right? So um,
Wait, how
I
many people have this?
well, I mean, they used to think it was super rare, but the more that people talk about it, the more they realize they just thought the other person meant something different. Like all of the people, most of us who have it were like, you can literally see something. We thought you just meant like figuratively. They're like, no, 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 they can literally see it. What do you mean they can literally see it? So until you have that awareness, you don't even realize that you can't do something everybody else is doing because it seems like you're like, you just assume we're all doing the same thing.
Yes. Wow. That's so interesting. It's interesting for me because I do visualizations all the time, one on one and in groups.
Yeah. And some
Yes,
people
that's
can't
like a
do it.
thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so if you have somebody who's like, I hate visualizations, right? I hate them. It could be that they can't do it, like they literally cannot do it, but they don't understand that everybody else in the room has like a movie going on in their head. They're just like, I don't know what you're doing, but this is boring. Right? Like they're sitting there with their eyes closed. I think I said to somebody, like, what do you see? They're like, the back of my eyes. It was like, me too. Right? Like there's no image popping up in your brain. And I understand you're not seeing it with your eyes, right? But it's like it's still as if you're there. There's like you're seeing something. So for those who can't visualize, for me, I used to get so frustrated. I'd be like, I hate it when people want me to do this. But even just acknowledging some people can't do it, being like, if you can't see it, just think about it. Just think about how you feel. Think about what you imagine what would be happening. Imagine, because imagining doesn't have to be visual, but for visual people, they think it does.
Okay.
um, Travel through what you think. Let yourself think things. Let yourself feel things, um, even if you can't see it.
That's
And
so interesting. But you know what though? So one of the things that I do, so I'm an NLP master practitioner, and visualization is a really big part of the practice. But one of the things that we do is when we are having people visualize things, we say, like, one of the things that we say in the visualization is pull up whatever the beach, but pull it up in a movie form, in a picture form, on a canvas, on a projector, still moving. Like, we allow the option to be a multitude of things. So that actually makes me feel a little bit better because I'm kind of like, oh my gosh, I could be totally like hurting people's feelings. We just lost Lara. But one of the things that we do as far as the visualizations with NLP is allowing people to do their visualizations in any way they want. So when I say pull up a beach, I actually say like on a canvas or on a picture or moving or right to left or left to right, black or white, colored, is it big, is it small, is it soft, is it loud, is it bright, is it dull? So there's a lot of different modalities that we go through regarding the visualization that individuals go through. But this is so interesting to me what Lara is saying as far as people who can't do that. And this is just such a great testament to how important it is to have empathy. Because if you can't, first of all, you don't know what you don't know. So I didn't even know that that was a thing. Now I know. But now knowing that now allows me to have empathy for other individuals in that situation who are possibly dealing with or don't understand that. So at any other time, it could have been years from now, months from now, could have run into somebody who says that they don't know how to do that. And I could be just my selfish ego self of an eye roll of course you can do that. Everybody can do that. How could you not do that? But because of the atmosphere that we're in right now, we're in a learning atmosphere with Lara right now and allowing her to share her past experiences and her past journeys with us. This allows me the opportunity to now learn something that I didn't previously know that I can now use in my future teachings and coachings and one on one in my world, in my community that I didn't have before. And that's why this podcast is so important because it really allows individuals to recognize that when you start having conversations with individuals like what Lara and I are talking about here, it allows us to show up with so much more empathy than we would have previously because you don't know what you don't know. And it isn't until you sit down with somebody and have a teaching experience or a learning experience with somebody that you can all of a sudden see things out of from their point of view and then be able to show up differently in your world for other individuals. And that's why things like this are so important to listen to watch podcasts, educating yourself, um, to be able to recognize how we all function so much differently. We think that the way that we do is the way that everybody does. And it just isn't the thing until You sit down and you listen intently, and you allow people the space to be able to share their story and their experiences to really get you to see things differently. Hi.
Hi, the power went out in my house for 10 seconds for no reason.
You know what's so crazy about that? That happened to me today too,
Hmm.
for no reason on my 10 o'clock call this morning. Anyways, this is fantastic. I love everything that you're talking about. I feel like, this is the stuff. This is the reason why it's so important to allow individuals the space to be able to share. Like, I didn't know it. This is like so huge for me, for real. It really is.
I believe it. I
That
mean, I
this is
talk about it a
big.
lot because it's such a good example of
Yeah.
how differently we all process. And like people have no idea because why would they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. This reminds me of a conversation I was having not too long ago about just colors and how people view color. And we assume that, like, the way that we view pinks and greens is the same way everybody else sees pinks and greens, but it's like not. Like, what I view as green, a shade of green, you could see it totally different shade of green than the way that I see it. So it's just
Yeah.
so interesting, it's perception.
And we have no idea what it is that other people see, right? Like because there's nothing that you can do to describe that thing other than to say the color, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like, but like, so we're all looking at what we think is blue, but there's no way to tell if it's different inside of us. But the fact that different people have such different favorite colors, right? Like when you were like, somebody loves this one and somebody else hates that same color. Is it because that's just their preference? Maybe. Is it because they see something completely different? Also, maybe. Right?
Yeah.
Like, we don't know. And so assuming that we're all operating the same way makes it really difficult to support people, right? Like if you just think people are thinking the same way, and you operate on how you would want things, you're missing out on how other people do things. And that's why I really believe there's no one way to do a thing. There are a lot of great ways. There is no way that works for everybody. And so we need to recognize that it's okay if you're told something is supposed to be a certain way and that doesn't work for you, it doesn't mean there's a problem. We just need to figure out what is going to work for you because we all have different things.
Yeah. Definitely. What would you say is the number one lesson that you've learned about life?
I mean, I feel like that's one of the big ones, right? Is if I don't assume that everybody is operating in the same way and that we all need to figure out what works for us and they all need to it impacts education, it impacts work, it impacts relationships. So I'll give you another quick example is when I had a better understanding of even how people made decisions. I would have conversations with people and I'd be like, here's a thing I would like to do. Here are the things that I believe impact the decision, right? Here, I'm laying it all out for you. So would you like to do it? And they'd be like, I need to think about it. And I'd be like, okay, what are you thinking about? Right? Like by the end of all of that information, you must know what you want to do. They're like, no, I need to think about it. I was like, what are you doing though? Like literally, what is happening? That like, how are you doing that? Like, what is happening in your brain as you think about it? And I realized other people. I mean, I've learned a lot about it, but like for me, a lot of my decision making is very much a gut instinct, right? It's like from my like yes, no, like that's the answer.
Yeah.
Other people need to process it emotionally. Other people need to process it. Like there's just a lot of different ways. But if
Mhm.
you're just like, well, are you just being difficult? Versus, no, like they are having a different experience than I am, right? Like it's different in every aspect of our life. There are people who have different experiences. And a lot of our frustration in life, I think, comes from not understanding why people do things and thinking that they should do them another way, right? Like, why aren't you doing it? Like, what are you doing? Right? And when you can start to notice how different we are, when you can start to understand that, you get less frustrated with people. You're able to communicate with them in ways that work, so then you don't have as much conflict. You're able to be more flexible because you understand why you're being flexible.
Yeah.
And so that's the big one. It's just we're so different. But we tend to have like these rules and these ways of being like we're not. And like the goal is to just learn to be like that. Right? If you can just learn how to be like that, we're good. And my thing is no, no, no. We're so different, and let's learn how to have all of those differences be part of how we operate in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. What would you what kind of advice would you give to somebody who's dealing with maybe not ADHD, but something similar? You know, I know that there's things that individuals are dealing with ADHD or a similar learning, you
Yeah.
know, frustration.
I think the big one is if you feel like there's something that you are doing wrong or you can't do, or like something is never working, right? That never works for me. Is allow yourself to consider if there's a way that it could work and allow yourself, right? It's like a reimagining. So I can't do it like this. But what could work? What could be true? Um, it's not that you're broken because I feel like that's like a piece, right? Like the people feel like they're broken and they might not walk around even realizing that's what they feel. They're like, I'm no good at that. I suck at this. I don't know why, right? And the internal like beating yourself up voice that you have in your head telling you you're not good at things. What if it's wrong? And what if things could be different? What if there's just a different way of doing things that isn't going to always make you feel like you're bad at something? And so, considering that that's possible, even if it's not going to be easy immediately to change everything, but considering it's possible for it to not always feel bad and that there might be a different way of doing things, I think is the thing I want people to know. Like, there's a lot of ways to be and do things. It's okay if the one you've been trying isn't working.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I want to give a quick shout out real fast to those watching live. Thank you so much for being here, hanging out with us. We appreciate it. For those watching on the replay, make sure you hashtag replay so that we know where you are and we can send you some love. But I want to ask, I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about your business and what you do and who you help and where people can find you.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of these things that I've been talking about are how I end up talking to business owners about their businesses. So, I work with established business owners. So, they've been in business usually for a little bit and they're doing okay. But they're like, I thought by now I'd be making more money, but I don't know how I can make more money. I'm already out of time. Or I thought that I would have more freedom and I don't. Or I can't seem to get that funnel built that I'm supposed to build, or I can't seem to, get that podcast off the ground that I think will change everything, right? Like all of these, like it's not working feelings, but I wanted it to be like this and I can't figure it out. That's who I love to work with because that's where we have really good conversations to figure out what actually is already working,
Mhm.
what's possible without it having to be harder, right? I think, again, everybody equates the next thing with being more work and harder work. But what I like to say is like, it's possible that there are things you're doing you don't need to be doing. It's possible that there's ways for you to find efficiencies so that you don't need to be working all the time. You don't need to just cram more work into there, but instead, you can actually be a happier person who does your job more efficiently and effectively because you're not on the verge of burnout.
Yeah.
And so the people who come to work with me tend to be feeling that frustration, but also they're like, I don't want my whole life to be about business. I also like still want to enjoy time with my family. Or like I don't want to work all the time. Like, is that even possible? And so when you're trying to build a business that works with the life you want to have and that you're willing to explore how things can shift, and you just want to have a safe person to have that exploration with, to find clarity. And like, I can teach all kinds of business strategy for sure, but the biggest piece is how can you start realizing, like, are you standing in your own way over here? Or like, what if it was easier? This whole what if it was easier? I feel very strongly that it's not that everything is easy all the time, but people are looking for things to be hard. So let's stop doing that. And those are the people that I want to talk to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm online in all the places, the biz.studio or Lara Wellman, one or the other. Well, Lara Wellman on TikTok and the Business Studio on Facebook and Instagram. And then my website. I've got a podcast also called The Biz Podcast, which you can find in all the podcasty places.
I love it. Very, very cool. Big dreams. What are your big dreams for your business, for your clients?
I want to finish this book. I want to get more people to start seeing how things can work without it being a struggle bus, right? Like the whole like, ugh, it's gonna be so hard. Like to me, whether it's continuing to grow, I do group coaching, I have online programs and one-on-one coaching, whether it's just that I'm helping more people there, or just supporting them through my book, my podcast, having other coaches learn how to connect with people in like this genuine way. That's the dream, is to just keep helping people see what's possible without it feeling like they have to sacrifice what they love if they also want a business, and how it doesn't have to be one or the other. And I just want people to believe in themselves more, right? I'm like, hey, if you need to borrow some of my belief in you for a while, but like, I really know how hard it is to believe that things can be different when it feels difficult, but like, it can be different.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And why do you do what you do?
I think it's because, I mean, there's a couple of pieces. For me, I've always been somebody who loves to have big, deep conversations with people, right? You're like, I was the one, people who I barely knew in high school, right, would call me when they had a problem. I'd be like, how do you even have my phone number? Like, I really think that my ability to connect with people and hear what they're saying is just part of who I am. And I like doing it. I forget what the original question was.
Oh, why do you do what you do?
How do I do what I do? Yeah, because I think it's important, because I think I want more people to believe that they can do the things they want and they don't have to just struggle in life. Like, I just see people on a path they didn't choose, right? Like, what is success supposed to look like? So I got the corporate job, and then I have to be a manager, and then I have to buy the house, and then I have to have 2 kids, and then I need 2 cars. Like, what's the next thing? And they never stop and say, like, is that what I want? What do I want? And it's okay to not want what people think you should want. And it's okay to not do things the way other people do them. And I see people start to believe that and start to step into it. Gosh, that feels good. I love to see it. And it's possible, right? And like, I didn't think it would work. I was like, I know, but it did. And like, that's why I do what I do, because it feels, I mean, I get a lot of joy out of it, but like, it's amazing to see all the joy and the ease that a lot of my clients end up having.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love it. Well, this has been absolutely fantastic. I so appreciate you hanging out with us and sharing some of your journey and some of your story with us. Do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
I think it's just to remember that, like, that piece when things feel hard and like you're not good at something, or like it feels like nothing ever connects the way you thought it would. Instead of trying to just do it anyway, what if you back up and look around and see if there's like a different right, the idea I often talk about is there's like people have this brick wall and they're like, I need to get through it. And they're just slamming into it over and over and over again. And they're turning black and blue and they're bleeding. And I'm like, back up because there's a door. If you just back up a few steps, we'll see this door. It's a completely different path, but you can just walk through it. And
Yeah.
so when things feel difficult, it's not just about trying harder and it hurting more. And then eventually you'll get there. Anytime you catch yourself saying, I just have to do it, maybe you don't. Maybe something else needs to happen.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. Well, this has been fantastic. I so appreciate you and all the goodness that you bring. For those of you watching live, if you resonated with the guest, Miss Lara Wellman, and all the goodness that she brought today, make sure you check her out at thebiz.studio. Ooh, thebiz.studio. And her social media. We love to connect people here on this platform in order to continue to rise. Thank you so much for showing up here on the Her Version podcast. This community is expanding every single day and is filled with females who are striving to do better than they did yesterday. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share. If you have an amazing story to share, a struggle to triumph, be sure to reach out to me here or at herversion.life. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. I'm so grateful to be here sharing a platform that allows people to share their truth and inspire others. As always,